Hi, guys. Today I'm going to introduce you to a former student of mine, Bob Fisher. He lives in Atlanta right now, and we first got to know each other when he was a freshman in high school, and I was in my first year of teaching high school at that time. And so I've invited him here today to talk to you and tell you about his experience as an artist, designer, and a business person. So, Bob, take it away.
Well, you've actually taken care of about half of the introduction I would have done for myself. What I'm excited to do is I know that you're producing this series of videos for high school students who are really interested in the arts. I know that you have a really unique way of teaching people that is very effective and very different from anything I've ever seen before. And I'm just here to share what parts of my story might help people really get into what it is that you're trying to help them do.
Well, thank you. I know you have a lot of experiences that I would really like these students to listen to. I think you could be a real inspiration for them. And you have had an excellent education. You have been involved in many different facets of the arts. And I want to, have you talk a little bit about those experiences. You have a very impressive resume. And so I'm going to have you go over a little bit of that today and tell some kid who just like, how do I get to be an artist, man? And what he or she is going to is going to face out there in that real art world out there.
Sure. Well, my path was my path, and other kids are going to find different paths.
Right,
But I'll
yeah.
tell you a little bit about mine. So basically, what happened with me is that I was somebody who had to try a lot of different jobs and a lot of different creative, ways to be a creative professional before I ultimately found how things work together best for me. And I feel like this is actually a lifelong evolution. So even where I am today isn't where I think that I'll wind up.
Yeah.
So do you want to hear about the specific sort of steps that I went
Yeah.
through?
Why don't you talk about maybe your experience in the art classroom when you were in high school, and then I guess your educational experience, and then what you did after that, after high school, where you went to college, and how that worked out.
Right. So basically, what I did in your classroom is I went through and I learned kind of a language, right? I learned the language of visual art. I learned the elements of art and the principles of design, and I got all these tools about how I could express myself in this visual language. And then I had to figure out what it was I wanted to do with it. So I start out by going to art school and in a fine art program, and I went to two different schools in my undergraduate education. And I studied painting and printmaking and photography and sculpture. And it was very natural for me as a curious person to want to try all these different things. And they're like dialects of this language that you're talking about. So I would want to try to see which one fit me best. Now, ultimately, for me, for a lot of people, they go through that experience and they find the thing. They find that, I think that's why artists talk about having a language, right?
Right. Yeah.
Really what they're talking about is they're talking about kind of a style and a dialect that's unique to them of
Right.
this language of visual art. Well, I went into it and found out that what I liked to being is a polyglot, somebody who spoke a whole bunch of different languages just based on who I was talking to or what I wanted to
Right.
communicate.
It's funny, Bob, because I think about how you like to work in a lot of different ways and deal with different styles, and I think about young artists who tell me that my style is so different. Nobody likes it. It's not like what people are doing today. And I remember a gallery owner one time told me that, hey, you may not be doing what's in style right now, but styles change and what's popular changes. So if you just hang in there long enough and keep working at it and give it everything you've got, it'll come around to, you being the one that's in style.
Well, if you're going to be successful at anything at all, and I don't care if it's art or if it's sports or if it's, math, it's science, whatever you're going to do, you're going to need persistence, right? And you're going to need dedication to what you're doing, and you're going to need to keep yourself moving and keep yourself learning and always growing. It doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
So what you're describing, and it's a great way that people can learn about persistence, is to kind of keep going when you think, well, or when you're having all these kind of doubts about, am I doing the right thing? Am I making the right decisions? If you're being truthful to yourself, and if you are being truthful with others through this visual language that you're learning, then chances are that's absolutely the right path for you.
Okay, so what happened to you in my classes that made you want to keep going? Did I contribute to that at all for you?
Absolutely. So what happened to me, that the way that I got to be inspired to keep going was I got a really good foundation. And so what did that good foundation mean? So I learned all about, I got a bunch of tools in my toolbox, and they were really great tools, the kind of tools that last a lifetime, the kind of tools that were a fantastic basic collection that I could still add to and make better, but they enabled me to do what it is that I wanted to do, which at the beginning of my artistic career, that was all about learning how to paint and draw and sculpt, how to build things, how to make physical objects that had aesthetic appeal and were expressions of what I thought was important, or opinions that I had, or just things I needed to get out emotionally.
Well, now, one of the things I promote in my videos, and I know I promoted in the classroom when I was in the classroom, and with you especially, was drawing from observation. To me, that is the fundamental thing that you have to be able to do. You have to draw from your imagination and observation. You have to have something in front of you and learn how to draw that well. We need to be able to see these things. I think every kid who wants to draw wants to learn how to do that. They want to be able to draw what they see. And they see that as sort of like the gold standard, if you will. And so I know you were particularly good at that. You were very adept at it. You came into the classroom essentially with pretty good skills to begin with.
I had a start.
But I know this is why I make kids do so much drawing, is because you need that. You need to develop that skill and never stop.
Right.
Like I said, Malcolm Gladwell said, practice isn't something you do when you're successful. It's something you do to become successful.
Right. So I was lucky enough that other art teachers that I had earlier introduced me to this idea and helped me to learn to draw. But I really didn't learn to draw from life until I got into your program. And to me, it's not because I learned some kind of hand skills. The hand skills are kind of the easy part. It's really about learning to see. Because when people start out drawing things, they draw kind of the picture of what's in their head that represents that thing. If I'm trying to draw a chair, I'll draw an icon of a chair that's based on what I think. But when you really learn to see, you can actually see the shapes that make up that chair as I'm looking at it from this angle or from this place. And then it really isn't that much of a leap to be able to then get the hand skills to record what it is you're actually seeing. But the main thing is being able to look at what's in the real world that's three-dimensional, not just in a photograph, and to be able to represent that thing in 2 dimensions in a drawing that you're doing. Interestingly, that's also the best way to learn how to then make something 3-dimensional, is if you can put it in 2 dimensions, to design it for yourself, and then go back and be able to build it as you've envisioned in 2 dimensions. But it's an amazing, what it does is it gives you this amazing tool to be able to capture what you see. Learn to see, capture what you see, but then also it translates into capturing what you see up here so that you can then make the 2-dimensional thing that could be the finished piece of art, or the 3-dimensional thing that then you might build from what you draw out.
Okay, so after high school then, what was your path like in college? What did you do there? Where
Right.
did you go to school?
So I went to school. I went to art school in Detroit, Michigan, and then I later finished up in Atlanta, Georgia. I
Did you
was
get
in
any
fine arts.
scholarships, by the way?
I did. I did. Do you want to talk
I
about
talk a lot about
now?
scholarships, so if
Yeah.
you want to share your story with them about scholarships, please go right ahead.
Okay, so now we have to jump into some of the things that are unique about your program and your approach. One of the things that I know that you always recognize as important is that not everybody has a situation where they can go into a field and get an education of any kind, let alone an art education. So you always let us know that there was these important practical aspects that we had to consider, and one of those was how would we pay for our education?
Yeah.
So there were two different things I think that are unique about your program. One is the exposure and support to scholarship opportunities, or I should say exposure to what these opportunities were, support in helping take advantage of those opportunities, because you helped us a lot to put together the right portfolios and you gave us advice on what might be better for the Art Directors Club of Cincinnati, which is one of the scholarships I got, or to the Center for Creative Studies or College for Creative Studies in Detroit, Michigan. Those were different portfolios based on what I was applying for.
Right.
So, and even help with us on like how to present our work and things that people might not think about. They might stop with, other art educators might stop with teaching people how to make the thing. But then what do you do with it, and how does it help you make a life that supports being a maker?
Oh, and one other thing that I know is very important to you is the sketchbook. I always push the sketchbook. They have a lot of videos on it so far, but a lot of that, me promoting it so much, has to do with you. Tell me a little bit about Sketchbob.
Okay, so sketchbooks have always been important to me. I've kept them regularly since I was 14 years old, and after a while, at a certain period in my career, they were the primary medium that I would use in order to express myself. And so I created a website that actually isn't up right now,
Sketchbob.com.
sketchbob.com,
Yeah.
where I showed a lot of these different pieces. Sketchbooks are, we could make a whole video just about sketchbooks, and I think there might actually be one in your Codex series.
I've got like 3.
About 3. Basically,
Well, 4,
sketchbooks
actually.
are an essential part of my creative process because that's where I both capture the things that I observe from the world and that I experience in the world that could be a part of something creative I want to do. And then it's also a place for me, it's like a playground where I experiment with different ways of expressing or creating to make sure that what I'm doing, what I'm producing, is right for the idea.
Okay, so Bob, after high school, after you got your beginning and your basics down and you made it into college, you got some scholarships, you went to a couple of different art colleges. What happened then? What happened to your professional life? I know personally, I know that you have had several, I guess, a variety of careers in the arts. And so I would like, go over for our viewers what your experience like was as an artist and a designer, because you've been both.
So in high school, I started to learn this basic language of expressing myself visually, and then I had to figure out what am I going to do with this, and how does that fit into other things like how do I make a living and how do I make a life as a creative person.
Mom and Dad want to
And a
know
maker.
how you're going to pay the bills, right?
Well, eventually, even I wanted to know
Yeah,
how I
right.
was going to pay the bills. But that wasn't the only thing. It was really about finding what kind of problems I wanted to solve and who did I want to solve those problems for, and other things that got beyond just the part about making a living, which is also really important. So when I got out of high school, the first thing that I did is I studied fine art. And I tried in some ways to replicate the experience, the really great experience that I'd had in high school. So I tried out all different kinds of disciplines. So I studied painting and I studied printmaking and photography and sculpture. And I thought that I would, also maybe I would add to that, look into teaching art on a college level or exhibiting in galleries or some kind of combination of those two things, making fine art, like being a fine artist.
It's one thing that's really good about art school. I used to always say that, it's like the candy store. You go out and you taste a little bit of all the different candies and you find out which one you like the best. And that's kind of what you do at an art school.
That's true. And some people find out right away, I'm really an apple sour person. Yeah. Like that's everything that I want to do. And they realize, and I went to school with some of these folks. Actually, a couple of the people I went to school with wound up becoming quite successful. One of whom is Kara Walker, who's represented the United States in the Venice Biennale, and wow. She's in she's in collections in every major museum that you want to name in the United States. And I was exposed to people who were taking very different paths, but they were finding what dialect of the language of art that they wanted to speak, and they were finding the things that they wanted to express, and they kind of went with it.
Yeah.
Right.
So what did you do?
So what I did was a little bit different because some people who were really successful, they had something that they were really burning to express, and art was the way that they did it. It wasn't that they simply enjoyed the activity. It's that they really had a kind of a message that was and a set of goals that were really appropriate for fine art. Well, it took me trying things out for a while to realize that's not really, that's great, but it wasn't me.
Yeah. So you had to make a change.
I did have to make a change. So one of the things that I did when I was trying to make my way as a fine artist, and it was just a practical step, was I started doing illustrations because I had good drawing skills and I had good hand skills and I could do that sort of thing.
Yeah, you were very good at that.
And so from illustration, then I started being around all these people called graphic designers. Now, I'd known some people who did graphic design in college, but I didn't really understand what they did. But when I started working with them, I saw what they did. I saw what kind of problems they solved. I saw the language that they used, what this language of graphic design was, and I just became absolutely captivated. I wanted to solve the same kind of problems that they did. I wanted to help, help clients or people in businesses or those people who could
solve their problems.
Well, what it is they hire you to have a voice for them that they don't have themselves. Right. So I spoke this language. They didn't speak this language. I would help them to succeed by speaking the language that I spoke of design.
Right.
And so I got kind of wholeheartedly into that. And I actually went back to school for it's a 2-year program at a place called the Portfolio Center. Yeah. And it was all about just teaching people the discipline that they were interested in.
And this is in Atlanta where you did the portfolio.
Right, the Portfolio Center.
Yeah.
I was the only person in the history of the school to that point that actually was allowed to have a dual major. And so I went there for both illustration and design.
Really? That's great.
Because I was still interested in what I had been doing before.
You were a good illustrator.
But then I went out and I became a designer, and I went to work for a small firm that did like annual reports and corporate communications and all these things that kind of sound like businessy buzzwords, but basically we were doing design stuff for the graphic design stuff to communicate for businesses. So from there, making a decision to go in design isn't enough. Even within design, there's a lot of different decisions that you have to make. You have to figure out, well, what kind of work do I want to do? And who do I want to do it for? What kind of problems do I want to solve? Mm-hmm. I keep going back to that idea because it really is about solving problems, right? That's a lot of what designers do. So I found that I wanted to do something that was a little less stuffy. And I had an opportunity to work at Cartoon Network This is in the late 90s, and there were a lot of exciting things going on, and I've been a total cartoon freak since I was a little kid, and so it was fantastic. So
Yeah.
I was a designer and an art director there. An art director in that kind of context is somebody who's actually a creative person and a manager, right? So I led a team of people who were other designers, and I did design myself.
Right.
So all of a sudden, I had to learn something completely new, which was, how do I help other creative people to do the best that they can do,
Yeah.
but making sure that everybody's solving the same problem.
Yeah. Well, I know when people mention the Cartoon Network, they automatically think, "Oh, so did you create any characters? Did you do the cartoons, or did you have did you have a different job for Cartoon Network?"
So this is really interesting because what I found is the more I went into any of these different jobs that I had, is that there was far more to it than what I ever expected. So with Cartoon Network as an example, yeah, there are people called show creators, and those are the people that created the characters, and those are the people that created the shows. And that's one whole huge area that somebody could go into just in cartoons.
Right.
But then you got to think about, well, how do you let people know the cartoons are there? How do you use the cartoons to kind of make a business that helps you make more cartoons? Well, there are a bunch of different other roles in sort of promoting the cartoons and in promoting the network, because back in the ancient days, it was a cable network.
Right.
That was the business that made the cartoons. So you had to help them to be successful. So I had roles as a designer and art director that were not in creating the shows, but making the business that made the shows to be successful.
So you had to do advertising essentially. You were doing
Part
the
of it was
advertising. You promotion. I mean, you mentioned something about how sometimes you had to do design like the cups and end caps and stuff like that for, like in McDonald's, where they would be promoting one of their characters or one of their cartoons, and you were part of the group of people that would design all that stuff that promotes the show.
Well, that and more.
Yeah.
So basically, I did do advertisements, because sometimes when we had a new show, we'd take out advertisements in consumer publications, and you'd want to make an ad that was gonna show there. Sometimes you'd make a promotional video for the public relations people so that they could send that out into the world, and that would jazz people up about what the new show was and give them a flavor of what that was about. But then there's also the question of, I mean, Greg, have you ever been in a store and you've seen like some kind of product that was made out of cartoon? It could be an umbrella, it could be a shirt, it could be whatever.
I have a granddaughter, so yes.
Okay, so
Everything, she has to get everything. It's the most popular cartoon character right now, whatever that happens to be.
right. So the thing is somebody's got to make that, right? Some creative person, if it's going to be good, has to make that. And so that was part of my job at Cartoon Network, is I led a whole team of people that worked in, the fancy word is consumer products, and that's what that was for.
Yeah. And this is one of the things that I always try to tell my students. It's like, look, the world needs good young artists. There's no end to the development that needs to take place. Businesses need to have their products and their services represented by visual people. And there's always good room for another good designer and another good artist. If you're really good, there's a job out there for you.
There is. And the thing is there's even more than what we're talking about, because now we're talking about, we're looking at a little piece.
Yeah, this is very
but
specific.
there's a whole bunch of different ways to be creative within that piece. Well, when you look at the whole picture, it's this big. Mm-hmm. And there's a bunch of different ways to be creative in all of those pieces.
Right.
So it's one of the things that's really hard about art school or even high school art is that there's so much to learn just to get the language of visual art down, to learn the elements of art and the principles of design and all of those things that you need to know to be able to express yourself visually. Right? And it's really hard to then also layer on top of that, well, what is it that I'm going to do out in the world that is going to allow me to use this language to do great things for other people and make a living for myself and all those things that people want to do or need to do, when they are making a life as a creative individual.
So what'd you do after the Cartoon Network?
All right, so after the Cartoon Network, I always had something that I called boss envy.
Okay.
Anytime somebody was telling me what to do, I was always happy to do it, but it made me very curious because
Yeah.
I've always been a very curious person. I would say, I'm an illustrator and somebody wants me to draw illustrations of candy for a candy catalog. But they're solving the problem of putting the whole catalog together. And they have to figure out what the typography is and how the pages go together and how all these different things happen. They were solving a different problem. Their problem was more complicated than my problem, and therefore to me, as a curious person, that problem was more interesting than the one I had been hired to do. So I'd ask myself, what do I need to know? What do I need to learn to solve this more interesting problem? So I would always pick up the skills, go back to school, ask people who knew how to do it for help, just try to learn and teach myself, how do I solve this bigger, more interesting problem? So I went from an illustrator to being a designer. And then when I was at Cartoon Network, I saw all these incredible creative people you talked about before, like the people who make the shows. And I said, man, that's really cool what all these other creative people are doing. What do I need, what do I need to do in order to learn that? Well, I was being bossed around by an art director and a creative director, right? Because
Right.
and I said, well, what do creative directors know that I don't know? Well, they usually have a lot of experience in design, so they know how to solve problems using that particular graphic language. But a lot of art directors are also writers. And so they come from that and they think about words and imagery together on how to communicate things. I've always loved words and pictures. And so I thought, all right, I think I need to learn how to get those skills, to express myself not just in visual language, but a written and verbal language. And how does that work together with the visual language? And how do I learn these other languages as someone who speaks mostly a visual language? Well, there's a way to do it. And so using the means that I talked about before, where you practice, you volunteer to do things for free, you get advice from people who already know. I essentially got the skills that I needed to move into like a creative director slot and an art director slot. And you have to learn other things too. You have to learn about, well, what are these businesses trying to do? You have to learn about the problems you're trying to solve.
So you've got all these skills now. So what did you do specifically then with all those skills?
Okay, so when I started getting more writing skills and I started understanding more about the problems we were solving, which meant I needed to learn more about business and things like that, then I wound up getting a job as the director of communications for a private school. And so during that time, my job was I had a team of people, some of whom were writers and some were designers and some were public relations people and all of that. And I had to figure out how to get everybody to work together to tell the story of the school.
Yeah.
Right? And we told the story of the school to people who were interested in coming there. We told the story of the school to people who would support it,
Right.
with donations and other things because it was a private school.
Right.
And it was really very similar or natural to move from what I was doing before, because before I was telling part of a story, and now I'm just telling a bigger part of stories.
Right.
Right? So I'm still using my skills and I'm still giving a voice to people who don't have one on their own to help them solve their problems.
Yeah, and you've got all these skills that you've acquired, and they come from different places, and they've helped you solve different problems, and they keep leading you to new things. and now you go from here to pretty much where you are today. You began
More or less.
after you left there, you went into an area that is the beginning of where you are now. So tell us what you're doing now.
So
after that,
there's
the
an
work at the
important
school.
step that I skipped in between Cartoon Network and
Yeah.
being the director of communications
Sure.
for that school. I actually had my own business for a while with a partner.
Okay.
Right, and so we had a design agency, like a
Right.
graphic design studio, but we really wanted to be more of a full communication agency, so we
Yeah.
could tell the bigger part of the story. So I learned a whole bunch about solving a wide variety of different problems, and I also got to understand who the clients were, and I learned about what problems they were solving.
So,
Well, you
yeah.
remember Boss Envy?
Yeah, so you're
as soon as-
you're the owner. You're a businessman
I'm a
now.
businessman now, but in a very special kind of business. It's all about being creative.
Yeah.
Right. So it's different than other kinds of businesses, but it's still a business.
Absolutely.
So I had to learn about that, but I also had to learn about the people I was trying to help.
Mm-hmm.
And to learn more about that, then I actually went back to graduate school and I got a graduate degree in marketing. I got an MS in marketing from a university, from a business school.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that gave me is that gave me other languages that I could also
Mm-hmm.
speak, right? So I could communicate with people in the business world and talk to them in their native language,
Right.
as opposed to somebody who was looking from the outside but only trained.
Okay, so
in
how do you
my
apply
visual
that now?
languages.
You got all this wonderful knowledge and wisdom. What do you do with it now?
Right. So what I've done right now is I brought all those different worlds together. And at the time of filming, I do advisory work or consulting, if you
Yeah.
will, for a company called Design Intelligence. And we serve primarily architecture and engineering firms and other people who help create the built environment, every place that we live and every place that we work, and
Yeah.
where we spend a whole bunch of our time, all the buildings that make up. One of the
built
things that
environment.
we've done for many years, or one of the things we're doing now, is we're putting out kind of a ratings guide for architecture and design programs to give information that helps students who are interested in pursuing a career in architecture, interiors, or one of those related design professions about what school is right for them.
Right.
Actually, it's interesting. I should bring this up. One of the things that we do as part of that is we have a section called the Most Admired Educators, and it just kind of highlights people out there, in the universities, either teaching or those people who are administrators who are really doing something special to advance the field of architecture and design education. And I know you won't say this yourself, so I'll say it for you. You are actually the only high school educator that I'm aware of who has ever gotten one of those most admired educator designations.
Very humbling.
And one of the things that I really appreciate that you did for the readers of our publication was you put together a really fantastic guide on how people can make the decision about what art or design program is right for them.
Well, it was a real honor, to be designated one of the most admired educators, but I think having the opportunity to write the article was just as important to me because I was hoping to reach more young people to help them achieve their dreams. Just like you got to pursue your dreams, you've had many different dreams that you have fulfilled. You were a young man with a lot of skills and a lot of desire, very intelligent, and I like to see that you've had such a several fulfilling careers, and you could have stayed with any one of them, but you always choose to grow and move forward with yourself. You have this incredible desire to learn, and I know a lot of young people out there are in that situation. How do I make the right choice? What do I do? And that's why I wanted to interview you, because you have so many experiences that I think it's important for young people to understand. That people go through this. And it requires that you do certain things. And Bob is one good example Hopefully, I'm going to have lots of other interviews with other former students who are out there working in different fields of art and design. But you are a particularly good example because, first of all, you have encouraged me to do what I'm doing here with you. You've encouraged me to pursue this, to take my teaching beyond the classroom. And that's one of the reasons why I have you here. And I want to thank you again, even though I thank you in my introduction. This is wonderful to have you here. You have an amazing career. But like, if you have a little bit more you want to say about it, I mean, I just started asking you the question, and I kind of cut you off a little bit there. But if you want to go ahead and
I only
elaborate.
have one more thing to say about that, which is, you want me to tell them the secret? Because there's a secret.
Go right ahead.
All
They
right.
need to know it.
The secret is you're not making the right decision for the rest of your life. You're just making the right decision for now.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I learned was it was probably the right decision for me when I was 17 to go into a fine art program. But then I learned by that experience that the next right decision for me was to go into design and to make a career there. And each time I came across new information, I realized there's a new decision to be made. One of the things that you always said to us when I was in high school is that being really good in art shouldn't mean that you're no good at anything else. People kind of have this stereotype that if you're good as an artist, that you're not going to be good at engineering, or that you couldn't also be a pilot, or that you couldn't also figure out chemistry or literature or whatever else, all these other things that people study or do for work. So I kind of took that literally, maybe even more literally than you meant. And every time I was doing something, every time I learned about a bigger problem to solve and I got curious about it, I always did still look at it through this really helpful lens, or this original language that I spoke as an artist and as a designer. And so that's kind of how I've been able to have experience whatever success I've had in the business world or in the nonprofit world, where I was for 7 years, is by making my decisions, learning my job, and doing my job in the way that an artist and designer would do them.
And that's a unique thing. Artists and designers have to think differently than other people. It's why people hire us, these artists and designers, to help them promote their products and their services and their ideas. Because artists are trained to understand the importance of and how imagery affects people out there. So